Hi everyone, I'm Flake and I'm here with another budget deck that you can make using only common and uncommon rarity cards. This time around we're going to be going ahead and delving into the wonderful world of white and black vampires. This video will show you the deck list that I've compiled, as well as give you a little guide as to how to play it so you too can have fun on the cheap. This time around, we're doing white and black vampires, and it is a viable deck type that you could make on the cheap, but you have to take it from an approach that doesn't necessarily use big minions that are typically found in the rare and mythic rare rarity category. So in this budget deck, I will show you how you too can be competitive and have a good time with a legion of vampires at your disposal. And it doesn't matter whether you're Team Jacob or Team Edward or whatever the hell you are. Nonetheless, you can make a deck with both colors, white and black, that will have a good time with. Now, the deal with having a budget version of white and black vampires, as we go ahead and we'll just put this over here, and that way we can get those all out of the way, is you want to create almost like a swarm of vampires, something that will have a lot of little creatures to overwhelm your opponent while having lifelink to keep your own health up, deal with the bigger minions that your opponent might be facing, and having way too many threats on the board, though small, will eventually bust them down to 0, and then you can win that way. So we'll go through all the cards. From the land category, we'll start there, obviously, but we'll go with 11 and 10 for the plains and swamp. So it's a fairly even distribution of both plains and swamp for white and black. And 3 Forsaken Sanctuaries. You can add more or less. It's up to you. Again, this is just a rough guide. I only own 3, and I find that drawing a lot of these early tends to hurt you early on, mainly because you want to be maximizing all your mana on the turns that you drop it. So having this, too many of these early on will always put you a step back, especially when you have some 1-drops and some early mana that you can play. So the 1-drop here would be for 1 plains, 1 white mana would be the Sky Marcher Aspirant. It's a 2/1 vampire. Now, this is a decent stat line early on to deal with any type of, obviously, in a 2/2 body. But the best part about this is that even if you do get them late game, they do get flying as you have the City's Blessing. So they do get a little bit more invulnerable to threats on the ground, and then you can kind of ping at your opponent as you go. For early game, also Duress, take out some of your opponent's non-creatures, like their enchantments and their artifacts, out of their deck early that you feel will probably come back to haunt you later on. The Vicious Conquistador. Whenever he attacks, opponent loses 1 life. It's another 1-drop that you can play. It's a vampire, and it's got a 1/2 stat line in this case. Now, this again puts a pressure on your opponent because he might not want to always, even anytime he attacks, your opponent loses 1 life. So even if he's blocked, you'll still get some value out of him. And a 1/2 is decent enough body for a 1-drop to, I guess, deal with some of the early on little annoying minions that you might have to face. Into the 2-spot category for creatures, we've got Martyr of Dusk. This is a 2 mana, 2/1. Now, the good thing about this is that it has a little bit of lasting power in the sense that when it dies, you do get a 1/1 with 1/1 token vampire with lifelink. Down the board again, this is a little bit more for cycling for some card draw. A 1/1 for 2, the Dusk Legion Zealot, or Zealot, however you want to pronounce it. It's all good. However you want to do it, tomato, tomato, it's all good with me. This one is draw a card, lose a life. Now, losing life, you have to assume that you'll be gaining a lot of it because you'll be creating tokens, having vampires, lifelink, etc. Life in your life total in Magic is just like any other resource. It's like your mana pool. Use it, spend it, as long as you're not spending it in the sense that you're in danger of actually losing the game, but treat it like any other resource pool. Manage it properly, and it's gonna do you wonders. We'll skip past the sorceries and instants, actually. We'll continue on with the creatures. But this is your bread and butter. And the fact that this card is not rare is going to really work well, especially for a budget vampire deck that revolves around token generation. This one is a 2/2 For 2 mana, 1 white, 1 black, it is the Legion Lieutenant, which gives all other vampires +1/+1. This is where the swarm mentality and the getting out of hand, where you're creating your little minions, becomes an issue. Because if you get 2 or 3 of these on the board, it'll cause immense trouble for your opponent to keep up with. And this then becomes a high value target where your other minions, some of the more bigger, heftier minions, might get untouched. This is always going to be something that your opponent will want to get off the board, but it's for 2 mana. The effects for this are fantastic. We're going to go to Forerunner of the Legion. What this does is allows you to sort of tutor out a vampire into the next turn, much like Forerunner of the Empire from the dinosaur deck I presented last time. This one does the same thing. Put it on top. However, when you draw it and you play a vampire, you can put a 1/1 token that lasts for the turn. So kind of pick and choose who you want to get buffed as you attack, but it's a good way to sort of guarantee yourself from drawing your creatures. Let's see what else we've got here. The Sadistic Sky Marcher. I've got 2 of these in this deck as well. The Sadistic Sky Marcher is a 2/2 that for 3 that has flying and lifelink. Flying is always great. Lifelink is going to be good as well, because as you're taking damage and protecting your own units by not blocking, by letting them stay on the board, this thing could sort of fly over some of your opponents to at least recover some of that damage that you've been taking. Let's see what else we got here. Now here is another fantastic card that it's almost a crime that this thing isn't rare, or because of the power level of this card. For 4, you get a 2/2 stat line for the Ravenous Chupacabra. Now, you think that that 2/2 stat line for 4 might be a little bit, what's the word? Like underwhelming, but the card text for this, the ability that it comes with, is just incredible. What you do is you play it and you essentially just destroy whatever creature your opponent controls. So a big, massive creature, something that it can't be blocked, something that's flying, something that you can otherwise not touch. This thing drops down for 4 mana. You get a body on the board and you get to destroy that card. It is just a package deal. I have 3 in this deck. You could play with 4. I've been told by some of my colleagues that if you don't play 4 Ravenous Chupacabras, you're out of your mind, but it has come into play. It has saved the day a lot of the times, and it's always a great top deck late game, especially when you need to get something out of the way. What else we've got here? Glorifier of the Dust. This is just a big body that has some ability for you. The pay 2 life aspect of this card, it's okay, because again, lifelink, token generation, and the amount of life that she'll probably be getting back is okay to pay these things. Essentially, if you want to maximize the value on this, it's 5 mana for 4/4, but paying 4 life gives it vigilance and flying, which is fantastic for an option to just keep it to hit your opponent and stay ready to defend. The 4 life, yeah, it seems a little bit hefty, but again, keep in mind, vampires revolve around lifelink and generating health right back. So those are the creatures. Now, like I said, in order to be competitive, or at least get a chance to win some games against some bigger decks with the budget vampires, is that you want to be generating tokens. So let's go down the list. Let's go back here. Call to Feast. This is a sorcery card, a white-black 4 mana, but generates 3 white-white vampire tokens with lifelink. That might seem like it's not the greatest trade-off, 4 mana for 3 1/1 tokens. But paired up, like I said before, with the Legion Lieutenant, this then becomes a snowball effect. Have 2 of these on the board. Now you're generating 3 creatures with lifelink, which again will overwhelm your opponent, and it becomes an issue. Now, I have that also with Queen's Commission. It's a cheaper version of the card. However, it only creates 2 tokens versus the 3. Again, token generation, very key on this. Now, that kind of generates you a large board of smaller minions. Now, how does that really affect? Well, eventually you'll be attacking and attacking and attacking, and it should be able to bust through your opponent to the point where they can't defend everything, and you're just dealing a lot of damage. Now, keep in mind, the whole theme of this video series is that it's on the cheap, and it's in a budget environment. Magic is a game where you'll have a lot of success with a lot of rare cards and mythic cards, obviously, because of the power levels. So don't get upset if you're losing more games than you're winning, but with this deck list, because you're essentially doing it with the bottom tier of cards. But it doesn't mean that you cannot win. If you flood the board with a lot of small cards, something like Gruesome Fate might actually come into play and win you a game, or just steal it off them. Gruesome Fate is a 3 mana sorcery that opponent loses 1 life for each creature you control. If you have a board of about 10 tokens, this could deal 10 solid damage before your attack, which in that case, you then overwhelm them with your minions, and you could probably steal a win possibly. It's definitely a card. I put 1 in here, kind of like it's a steal and win card. If you have a big board, so hang on tight. If you draw it early, maybe that's something that you kind of set up your board to eventually play. Down the board as well. Walk the Plank, a 2 mana, destroy a non-merfolk creature. If there's something that's on the board that's bothering you, chances are it's not a merfolk. You can go ahead and just axe it out of the way if you don't have a Chupacabra or whatnot. For 2 mana, not too bad. It's a sorcery again, so play it on your turn. Moment of Craving. This is a great card. It's give a target creature it's -2/-2 until the end of turn. You gain 2 life. So it's essentially you're dealing 2 damage to a creature if you're not attacking it, but it also can play as a surprise on an opponent who's either attacking you, and then you can go ahead and kill it with your defense and playing Moment of Craving. I've got 3 in here. It's good for early game control, and the gain 2 life is just sort of a little cherry on top. That was it. We already saw Duress, but that is the basic card list for this budget deck. After this, we're going to dive into how to level up the deck and improve on it and upgrade with some rares and maybe a mythic card. So you've seen what the deck can do with just commons and uncommon cards, and let's say you like it and you want to take the deck to the next level. You want to level up the deck and upgrade it. Here are 5 suggestions of rares and 1 mythic rare suggestion that you can go ahead and add to the deck should you choose to invest your wildcards for that and have some more fun with the white-black vampire archetype. The first card that I would suggest from the rare category would be Mavren Fane, the Dusk Apostle. Now, the text on this card is whenever 1 or more non-token vampires you control attacks, create a 1/1 vampire token. So this is again in the synergy of token generation and creating a large board. And what this means is when a non-token vampire attacks, Mavren Fane will then go ahead and create a brand new token. Again, that token will then synergize with the +1/+1 bonuses, with attacking and such. So again, synergizing with the token generation vampire archetype, this is a great rare card that you'll want to add to the pool. Down the road, again, we will go ahead and talk about Sanctum Seeker. This is a black vampire, a 3/4 stat line for 4. And what this guy does is whenever a vampire you control attacks, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. So that swarm of vampires, that horde of little tokens that you've just generated and spent many turns cultivating and reaping the benefits of, now they all go in all at once, and suddenly your opponent takes 1 damage for every vampire you attack with, and you gain a life. So let's say you have 9 of them. That's +9 on your side, -9 on your opponent. It's an 18 life point total swing, not to mention the damage that your vampires can go. This is a crazy card to throw on the board in a swarm situation and can definitely turn the tide for you to surprise your opponent with down the road. The next one that I want to talk about is the Champion of Dusk. This is a 5 mana 4/4 vampire, and his text reads: when Champion of Dusk enters the battlefield, you draw X cards and you lose X life, where X is the total number of vampires you control. This is purely, again, keeping in mind the fact that your life total is just a resource like any other, like your mana or whatnot. What he does is he gets down to the board and you count the number of vampires you have and you draw that many cards. Now, don't overdraw and don't draw to the point where you don't have life to support it, but it's a great way to refill your hand and continue on with your life. The Champion of Dusk is great for that. The last but not least, oh no, that's it for creatures, for rare creatures. Now here comes the fun part. This would be Anointed Procession. You might have seen this in other token decks. It is a staple enchantment. Throw this in your deck, especially if you're creating tokens. What this does is essentially, if I'll read it out, it says if an effect would create 1 or more tokens under your control, it creates twice as many of those tokens instead. What does this mean? It means that that card, Call to Feast, that would create 3 tokens, well, it creates 6 instead. Any type of creature you have that would otherwise generate a token, it's creating 2 instead. So you're doubling up that swarm mentality with Anointed Procession. This is a card that when it hits the board, your opponent will immediately know what your archetype is and will desperately try to get this off the board. So make sure that you can play it and maximize its potential and value right off the bat. Otherwise, your opponent will want this gone immediately. The next and last rare suggestion I would have would be Radiant Destiny. This is another enchantment, a rare enchantment. What it says is, as it enters the battlefield, you choose a creature type. Obviously, in this case, you'll take vampires. Creatures that you control with that type will get +1/+1. And as long as you have the City's Blessing, which with the amount of stuff you'll have on the board is not that difficult to attain, they also have Vigilance. So it's attack and sit back and wait for it. They will be ready to go at all times. That does it for the rare suggestions for this budget deck, but we do have one mythic rare suggestion that I'm going to throw in, and this is one that was really debating because there was a few cool options, some that I play, some that I don't play, but given the basic archetype of the deck, I went ahead and just put in Vona, Butcher of Magan. Now, he is a 5 mana, or she is. I can't really tell. We'll just say the vampire is a 4/4 legendary vampire knight, and vigilance and lifelink. But the bread and butter of this, again, keeping in mind your lifeblood, your life total is a resource. It's tap and pay 7 life to destroy target an odd land permanent. Use this ability only on your turn. What does that mean? Well, given it has vigilance, you can attack with her, then use her ability to destroy something on the board. A giant creature, an artifact that's pissing you off, an enchantment that's stopping you or giving your opponent a great advantage. Use that 7 life, you'll regain it in a heartbeat. She has lifelink, she'll attack, and you can tap her, she untaps, you go nuts. This is a great card later in the game to sort of assert some dominance, get some great value off of, and hopefully your opponent doesn't wipe it out of existence. That does it for this edition of Budget Decks. I'm Flake. If you have any suggestions for decks that you want to see a budget version build, please reach out to me. You can go ahead and hit me up on Twitter at WatchFlake, or subscribe here on YouTube, or watch me live on Twitch at twitch.tv/WatchFlake. I appreciate your comments and all your insight. Until next time, be good to one another, and we'll be back with more Budget Decks very soon.